France and Germany have unveiled this economic recovery plan. Will you and will Sweden support this plan?
Not as it looks right now. Of course, this will be a discussion among the ministers of finance, but also among the leaders of Europe. We're definitely willing to cooperate in the European Union during this crisis, and we've been also a very constructive partner when it comes to fighting this crisis, for instance, for the EIB, but also the SURE mechanism. We also will support some kind of recovery fund, but we have to discuss exactly how it will look like. And from our perspective, we think it has to be realistic, both when it comes to size, but also the conditions. But I think even more important to say is that if the European economy is to recover, it will be even more important to have the internal market to fully function again. That will be a very important driver to restart the European economy.
Minister, how do you understand the conditions, right now? I know we lack detail, but Germany, for example, said that the plan would in no way have any kind of debt mutualization. Is that also how you understand it?
Well, that's something we find very difficult from a Swedish perspective, and I think this will be one of the discussions that we'll have among the ministers of finance.
I know of Sweden, Denmark, and the Netherlands, Austria. Go ahead, Tom.
No, please. Go ahead, Francine, please.
Minister, I was going to ask you about this new proposal that was put by some of the Nordic countries for an EU economic recovery plan that only involves concessional loans to countries that need them. Do you think that will go ahead? Is it getting traction?
Well, I think that's something that could be interesting for many countries. And I also think it would be maybe easier to explain for the citizens of Europe if we work with loans rather than grants when it comes to the recovery phase.
Minister, good morning. Tom Keene from New York. All of this world, and particularly the world of science, is watching the experiment of herd immunity in Sweden, the opening up of Scandinavia, the ability of Sweden to get back to normal. How far is your nation from getting back to a normal economy and normal tax regime, which you're expert in, given the dramatic difference in deaths between Sweden and the rest of Scandinavia?
We have had, from the government side, we have listened to the Swedish experts and the advice that they have given us on how to fight this pandemic. And they have worked on a long-term strategy because they think this will last for a long time, and therefore you have to have measures that can also last for a long time. And I think it's important to underline that life in Sweden doesn't go on as normal, because the recommendations we do have when it comes to social distancing, working from home, avoiding public transportation, not to travel, of course affects how life looks like in Sweden, but also, of course, our economy, just like in other countries. And the thing is that, and this will, of course, continue both when it comes to social distancing and other restrictions.
We're getting in the data now, and it's remarkable the difference in data from now versus 9 weeks ago. How does Sweden re-engage with Europe given 4,000 deaths?
How we re-engage, I mean, we do have a very close cooperation in Europe, and we are at different stages in the pandemic between the European countries, and also some countries were hit earlier, and I guess other countries will be more hit later during the coming months and weeks. And from our perspective, the cooperation we have in the European Union will be very important for the economic recovery in the coming weeks and months.
Minister, what kind of conditions do you want to see attached to the disbursement of aid towards countries most hit by the virus?
Excuse me, I didn't understand the question. I didn't hear it quite.
So the question is kind of what conditions, if there was a program to give money to Italy and the others, what conditions do you want to see attached to that plan?
Well, that's something we're open to discuss. I think there should be conditions when it comes to supporting other countries, just as There are conditions, for instance, in international bodies when they do give support, in other international bodies when they do give support. So I think conditions are important, but we're open to discuss what kind of the conditions there would be when it comes to, for instance, long-term sustainable public finances.
Do you think that loans are really the solution for countries, more loans are really the solutions for countries such as Italy right now?
Well, we definitely think that loans could be a way forward. Of course, depends on what the loans look like and what are the conditions also for the loans, but also the conditions for getting the loans.
I mean, Italy's debt is going to be nearly 160% of GDP. How sustainable is that longer term? Do you worry that certain countries will need bailouts at the end of this?
I have for a very long time been concerned with the debt levels in many European countries. And I think it is a concern not only for me, but for many citizens in Europe, the debt levels we do see in some countries. But this is not the time to talk about how we enter the crisis. This we can talk about after the crisis is over. Now it's about handling the situation. But of course, if countries do have very high debt levels, need more loans, then you have to talk under what conditions they will receive those loans.
Minister, how do you think this crisis will change Sweden and Europe forever, longer term? What will be the legacy of the coronavirus?
I really hope one of the legacies is that we did work together. So far, we've had very good cooperation within the European Union. We had a very quick crisis response, for instance, when it comes to the SURE mechanism, but also when it comes to EIB work. I also know that the Euro countries work closely within the ESM. And I definitely hope that this crisis will make us even better at working together during hard times, but also during good times.